point of view. So I have seen in the development of ISKCON or ISKCON society over years that many years before, the mind, devotees dealt with the mind as it's just Maya and you just push through, never mind it. But as time went on, more and more devotees began to realize that dealing with the mind in that way is perhaps not such an easy thing. It's not such a quick solution. So in recent years there's been more interest in understanding what is the mind, how it works, what its problems are. But often we see that this interest in psychology may take some devotees outside of the reference. I was speaking this morning, Guru, Shastra, Sadhu, outside of that reference. It even appears that devotees think that, I'm saying some devotees, I can't give you any percentages, but I sometimes meet this opinion that to deal with the mind and its problems, that one should go outside of the reference of Shastra. Different reasons are given. Some of them are really ignorant that Shastra doesn't have much to say about psychology. And other times it's that, well, this is the modern world and Shastra is about some ancient time and in a different place, India. Our problems that we have today are special, are different. So we should take the treatments that are now current in our modern society. Now, I don't want to, my purpose in this seminar is not to say that there is no help to be gotten from some form of therapy or counseling like you might find today. But my purpose here is just to speak about the Shastric definition of the mind and explain how, according to Shastra, the mind works. So that I hope that you can see that yes, it is possible to have all questions answered, all such questions about psychology answered very nicely in a very pure and spiritual way, if we turn to the Shastra looking for these answers.
Otázky můžeme najít v šástrách velice v čisté duchovní podobě, pokud je tam budeme hledat.
So, what I'm going to present to you today is a general summary.
Dnes bych tady podal takový obecný souhrn.
I'm not going to be concerned very much with offering you specific verses and quotations from Srila Prabhupada's purports. I just want to give you an overview of this subject. And then in the days that follow, I'll be bringing in evidence from the scriptures. And I have to tell you that I have enough material here for maybe 20 days of a seminar. So I don't know how much I'll cover in these 5 days. But it doesn't matter really. My purpose here is to just to show you that within Srimad Bhagavatam and other Vedic scriptures, there is vast information about the mind, its workings and its problems. And so remember, Srila Prabhupada said that all questions, the answer to all questions will be found in his books. We just have to look for them there. So now, let's talk about the mind. The first thing, and very, very important thing, that I want to impress upon your minds is that the mind is a real thing. It is listed in Bhagavad Gita as one of the 8 principal elements of creation. It is subtle, but it has substance. So, this idea that we have, or that devotees used to have years ago, a mind is just Maya. This attitude is, coming close to Mayavadi philosophy. As Srila Prabhupada explains in his purports, Srimad Bhagavatam 3:26-31, and 3:28-7, the mind is the energy of the Supersoul. So if we dismiss the energy of the Lord, it's just Maya. You see, this is coming close to the attitude of Mayavadis, who say that this world is sheer illusion with no substance, no basis at all. And because it's just illusion, then you can just, with a wave of the hand, make it evaporate into nothing. But it is best not to try to deal with the mind that way. Because the mind is a direct energy of Paramatma, and it is most powerful. So first I want to now speak on 5 points. So the number 1, that the essential substance of the mind is the mode of goodness, sattva guna. And this sattvic energy is the potency of Lord Aniruddha. So, Lord Aniruddha, I'm going to hopefully be able to explain more about Aniruddha and Pradumna and Shankarchan, etc. later. But right now, all you need to know is that Paramatma in your heart is a manifestation of Aniruddha. And who is Aniruddha? Aniruddha is one of the Chaturvyuha. The Chaturvyuha means 4 aspects of Krishna. For the purpose of creation, the Lord enters into His material energy in these 4 aspects: Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradumna, Aniruddha. And it is by the influence of these 4 that the whole creation comes out, step by step by step. In fact, as I hope to show you, you can actually very easily understand this process of creation that is presented in the Bhagavatam, in Canto 3 and other cantos. You can very easily, at least have an overview of the whole thing. If you understand what is happening between each of the Chaturvyuha and the material energy. So for right now, Lord Aniruddha, he is the 4th of these 4. So this is the final stage of material manifestation, when the living entities receive their material bodies and the Lord enters into the heart of each body as Paramatma. So His energy by which He gives us knowledge, remembrance, forgetfulness, in other words, the media, the via media, through which we have a relationship with Paramatma, every living entity, that energy is the sattva guna. And this thing that we know as the mind is essentially that, sattva guna. So second point, when this sattvic mental substance is dedicated to the Lord, it is transformed into what we call Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is transcendental goodness. Shuddha sattva, Vasudev sattva. This is the pure state of the living entity above the 3 modes of nature. So you see, there's transcendental goodness, and a step below, there's what we call the mode of material goodness. So coming to Krishna consciousness, you see, if we can be in the mode of goodness, then it's just one step up.
Takže pokud dokážeme být na úrovni hmotného dobra, tak potom vědomí Krišny už je jenom o jeden stupínek výš.
And I told you, it's the mind's own nature
Jak jsem říkal, je to
to be sattvic.
být sattvická.
So then we have to know how to dedicate the mind to the Lord. That's the third point.
To je teda třetí bod, jak mysl věnovat zasvětit Pánu.
So now I'm going to give you a little peek into one of the key mental functions.
Tam trochu nahlédnout na jednu z klíčových mentálních funkcí.
And this is the flow of desires,
A to je proud nebo tok tužeb,
which is called vasana in Srimad Bhagavatam. This term is explained by Srila Prabhupada in his lectures.
což je ve Šrimad Bhagavatam nazváno slovem vasanam, to vysvětluje Prabhupada v přednáškách.
If you look up vasana Sanskrit dictionary,
Když se to podíváte v sanskritském slovníku,
you'll find that it actually means a kind of flowing into.
Zjistíte, že to znamená něco jako vtékání.
So desires are flowing into the mind from a deeper state, which Prabhupada, as I say, we want to keep things simple today, so we'll just Prabhupada used this word subconscious.
Takže touhy vtékají do mysli z hlubší úrovně, která dneska zůstaneme na jednodušší úrovni, tak se dá nazvat podvědomí.
Now I hope in these 5 days I'll have time to explain exactly what the subconscious is. You'll find that interesting. But for now, the seeds of desire are in the subconscious. And they flow into the mind. Or grow into the mind. And so the mind is always rippling with desire. You know, like the surface of water. So third point is, when we speak of dedicating the mind to Krishna, so that we can become Krishna conscious. It simply means to channel the flow of desires to Krishna's lotus feet. So, unless we take into account our desires, then there is no question of controlling the mind. As I'm using these are stock phrases, you know, controlling the mind, pacifying the mind, fixing the mind. See, the quality of our mind means the quality of our desires. So, dealing with desires is essential. To what I will call today, Vedic psychology. And again, the way to come to Krishna consciousness is to have these desires, they're flowing, but they should flow to Krishna. And this is the way your mind, which Gita says can be your best friend or your worst enemy, this is how your mind becomes your best friend. So fourth point is that the original condition of the mind is Krishna consciousness. You see, This is really a key point that I want you, when you leave this summer camp, I want you to take this with you, that the mind in its original state is actually what we know as pure consciousness.
Takže to je klíčový bod, který bych chtěl, abyste si odsud odvezli, až se budete rozjíždět z letního tábora, abychom věděli, že mysl je ve svém původním stavu, ve stavu čistého vědomí.
Even beyond this mode of goodness.
Dokonce víc než kvalita dobra.
We're talking about now the spiritual energy of the soul, consciousness.
Mluvíme o duchovní energii duše, o vědomí.
That is the original mind.
To je původní mysl.
So, I'm stressing this because so often questions come whenever the subject of any class is the mind, and we talk about the problems of the mind. So devotees, I guess these devotees who are themselves struggling a bit with the mind, they ask the question, will we have a mind in the spiritual world?
Protože vždycky, když se mluví někde o mysli na přednáškách, tak odaní, který pokládám, že mají nějaké problémy s myslí, tak se vždycky vrací ta otázka, budeme mít mysl taky v duchovním světě?
It suggests that they would really like to get rid of the mind altogether. They're hoping that when that day when we become fully Krishna conscious, then we can throw the mind away in the garbage can. But this is not the process. Again, this is coming very close to the Mayavadi idea. So, we have a material mind only because our desires are now flowing towards lording it over material nature. Prabhupada said, you see this idea that one day I may have no mind, more or less, in other words, what you're saying is, one day I will have no desire. And that is precise Mayavadi philosophy. Srila Prabhupada always insisted that it is not that we can be free of desire, but we have to understand that the original desire is spiritual. So again, when our desires flow to Krishna, that is the spiritual mind. That is pure consciousness. That is Krishna consciousness. And it's only because our mind are flowing in the opposite direction towards Maya, to lording it over, the material nature, that now we have all this trouble upstairs. Okay, so point number 5, very short point, but very important point. That what we know to be the material mind is in essence material attraction. Again, come back to the point of our constitutional position as spirit soul. That it is our nature to be attracted by something. This is the position of the tiny jiva. He needs to take shelter of something greater than himself. He needs to be drawn into the service of something greater than himself. So, there are two choices.
Jsou dvě možnosti.
Krishna, Maya.
Krishna a Maya.
Okay? And Jiva, what is his position? Marginal. He's in between.
Jaká je pozice Jivy, že je okrajová, je mezi tím.
So, there's no question of being desireless.
Není otázka nemít žádné touhy.
There's no question of having no attraction to anything. And if you think about it, you can understand that this is the last snare of Maya. This is what Prabhupada called Mayavadi philosophy. Because this is the Mayavadi program for still trying to become God. You see? The program of the karmis, the sense enjoyer, they also want to be God. But they want to be God by doing, by acting. You see, in this world, trying to control everything, trying to be the enjoyer of everything, trying to be the center of everything. The materialist, each one is trying to put himself in that position by his work. So the impersonalist jnanis, they know that this is hopeless, but they still want to be God by being free, by being independent. See? Not attracted to anything, neither Maya nor Krishna. You see? Not taking shelter of anything. So this is still within Maya. Because, why? Why is it? Because this is not the constitutional position of the little tiny soul. That little soul cannot be independent. So that attempt to be independent means that he's still within the orbit of Maya. You understand? If you go away from Earth in one of these space shuttles, then you can look down and see the Earth very far away, and you can think, I'm free of that place. But you're not, because you're still in the orbit. The gravitation is still holding you. You see? And it means, you see, spinning around the Earth like that means you're being pulled by gravity. It's like swinging a ball on a string. So it goes around and around, but it's held in place. It's not free. And eventually it has to come down. So it's the last snare of Maya. Yes. So this is one thing that you need to again and again hear, that there's no question of becoming free of desire, mindless. What we need to do is purify our desire, and in this way regain our pure mind, which is Krishna consciousness. So now these were 5 introductory points. Now I want to speak more about the mind's activities. So there are 3, Prabhupada, whenever he would talk about psychology in the Vedic context, he was speaking about 3 things. Thinking, feeling, and willing.
myšlení, cítění a chtění.
Now this is understood also in modern psychology.
A to je chápáno i v moderní psychologii.
They have very fancy names for these three.
Proto mají takové speciální názvy.
The thinking mind they call the cognitive mind.
Myšlení nebo mysli, tomu říkají kognitivní mysl.
And then the feeling mind they call the affective mind.
A to je cítící mysli, říkají afektivní mysl.
And the willing or acting mind they call the, I don't know if you have a word for this, conative. It's a fancy word. But it just means willing or acting.
Pak ještě existuje třetí takové sofistikované slovo protože mysl také chce a jedná.
So this is psychology in a nutshell.
To je psychologie v takové kostce.
Thinking, feeling, willing.
Myšlení, cítění, chtění.
Now, think of the, I'll call it the energetic level of thinking, feeling and willing.
Když budeme uvažovat o energetické úrovni myšlení, cítění, chtění.
Imagine again waves, as I told you, in the water.
Představte vlny na vodě.
So these are real movements
To jsou skutečné pohyby.
of Krishna's energy.
Krišnovy energie.
You see? This is not just illusion. This is not just fantasy.
To není jenom iluze a fantazie.
And these movements are very, very complex.
Tyhle pohyby jsou velice složité.
And, you know, this is what psychology becomes, especially the modern psychology. All kinds of mysterious manifestations of mental energy.
Tím se zabývá psychologie, zvlášť moderní různými tajuplnými projevy mentální energie.
And so many explanations of people's different mental problems.
Je tolik různých vysvětlení pro různé mentální problémy lidí.
Now the basis of all this, again, thinking, feeling, willing. It's simple.
Základ toho všeho je myšlení, cítění a chtění. To je jednoduché.
But why does it get so complicated?
Ale proč se to tak všechno stává složitým?
And the answer is, again, desire.
A odpovědí je touha.
It's our desires that make our mind so complicated and well, you know what it is. So disturbed and so untrustworthy.
Naše touhy jsou tím, co dělá naši mysl tak komplikovanou a rozrušenou a nedůvěryhodnou.
So flickering.
Tak těkavou.
Yes. This is why psychology becomes such a difficult subject.
Proto se psychologie stává tak těžkým oborem.
But if you understand this, that the key to this complexity is our desire, then already it starts to become more simple.
Ale když pochopíme, že klíčem k celé téhle složitosti jsou naše touhy, tak už tím se to stává, tím se to zjednoduší.
See, the karmic psychology can't come to such a simple, ultimate explanation of things.
Karmní psychologie nemůže dojít k takovému jednoduchému konečnému vysvětlení.
Because the psychologists themselves are within the material mind.
Protože sami psychologové mají hmotnou mysl.
And they have their own desires.
Mají svoje touhy.
And they're seeing the minds of others through their minds and through their desires.
Dívají se na mysli druhých skrze svoje vlastní mysli a svoje touhy.
So this is how things get so very complex.
Kvůli tomu je potom všechno velice složité.
And so very deceiving.
Taky jako klamné.
So because the Krishna conscious explanation is coming from the platform of tattva, which means Krishna's vision. Krishna's explanation of how his own energies work. Therefore things are very systematic. and can be more easily understood.
A dá se to snadněji pochopit.
It's not, even this Vedic psychology is not like ABC simple.
Že ani ta védská psychologie není jednoduchá jako abeceda.
You see, if you study the explanation of the mind as it is presented in the Srimad Bhagavatam, then you can't separate that explanation from the process of creation. Because actually creation unfolds from subtle to gross. And there is a cosmic mind, or even we should say a metacosmic mind, even beyond the universe, the Mahatattva. The Mahatattva is simply a great mind.
Existuje kosmická mysl, nebo dokonce můžeme říct metakosmická, ještě nad tímto vesmírem v Mahatattva je v podstatě jedna velká mysl.
It's a vast, primeval mind state.
Obrovský, rozsáhlý, prvotní stav mysli.
Of Hiranya Garbha or Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. See? This is what we go into when we start talking about Vedic psychology. So, what I'm saying is, this is not simple ABC matter. But it's a little difficult. But if we go through this difficulty, then we can gain transcendental knowledge and know how to deal with this mind. So, yes, thinking, feeling, and willing. This is a real energetic movement, subtle energetic movement. And it has physical effects. This is how we know it's real. You see, you have a desire manifests in your mind to raise your hand and scratch your head. So this is the effect of a thought process. You feel some, first you feel some itching there. You think about it first. You're aware of it. There's itching there. And it's not going away. So then your thinking then, it becomes more intense. It intensifies into an emotional state. See, my head is itching. Oh, and it's not going away. Oh, it's starting to bother me. So, you see, then energy is building up in the mind. We go into this feeling stage, emotional stage. And then finally, I have to do something. You see, it reaches some point where we can't control anymore. And it flows into activity. And this means the physical effect of the energy of the mind. The arm goes up and scratches. See? So the mind is a real thing. You see? Everything we're doing, it's originating first in the mind and passing through this thinking, feeling, and then willing. So this body is called the field of activities, Kshetra, and we are Kshetragya. the knowers of the field.
My jsme kshetragi a znalci toho pola.
Actually, as I'll explain, right now in conditioned state, we're not very good knowers of the field. And this is again what Vedic psychology is all about. Knowing that field as it actually is. Then you can deal with it in a proper way. But the conditioned soul doesn't know this field very well. And that's because, again, the desires are flowing every which way. The mind is out of control, the senses are out of control. The false ego is projected over everything. We're thinking, this is mine, and this is mine, and this is mine. So then our vision of this field is very distorted. And very covered by ignorance. Yes. But anyway, the knowing potency is there. If we cultivate the mode of goodness, then we come to this proper knowledge. So now you've all heard of the phrase mind over matter. I mean, people get the idea that one idea is, my life, like I was just describing, their field of activities as they perceive it is very disturbed. So many problems are there. So then they think that simply by changing my mind in some way, I'll solve everything. Now, I was just telling you how everything flows from subtle to gross. So this idea that I could change my whole life by changing my mind, it's not that it's completely wrong. But you see, the problem is, in our conditioned state, our mind is controlled by desire. And this brings us back to what I was saying before, about how difficult the modern Western psychology and all these efforts, to come to some mental clarity, how difficult, how impossible it is. Because people are not in control of their desires. So here's someone, he's got all kinds of problems. In his head and in his field of activities around. And then he goes to one of these self-help seminars. And there's someone up there who's speaking very dynamically. You can do it. You can gain control. You just have to have faith in yourself. And there's so many of these seminars now, and so many books in the bookshop. But the problem is, you see, is that our mind is under the control of desire. So, in order for you to gain control of your mind, you have to gain control of your desire. And this the karmis cannot do. I mean, it's just out of question. You see, the karmis, because of the false ego, they think that their desire is actually their their true will.
Takže chromí tím falešnému egu si myslí, že jejich touha je jejich pravá skutečná vůle, co chtějí.
They don't understand that they're just being tossed here and there by the angry waves of an ocean of material desire.
Nechápu, že se s nimi jen tak pohazují sem tam rozbouřené vlny oceánu hmotných služeb.
That they're helpless.
Že oni jsou bezmocní.
They're thinking, no, I want this.
Oni si myslí, ne, to já chci.
And I want that.
A tady to chci.
You see? And I want this other thing.
A tam je tu druhou věc.
And this is good for me.
Tohle je pro mě dobré.
This is my will.
To je moje vůle.
Huh? So Bhagavatam so very nicely says that when the living entity is in Maya, then he's forced by the material nature to act against his real will, which is spiritual, of course.
Bhagavatam říká, že pokud je živá bytost v máji, tak jí to nutí jednat proti svojí vůli, což je duchovní vůle.
So this is very, very important to understand. You cannot control the mind just by, a snap decision. That from now on I will do only this and not do that. You're not in control of your desires. You will do what Maya wants you to do. Even at 1 second after you've made that vow. If Maya directs, you go back doing this nonsense thing, you'll do it. Mm-hmm. So, when we consider how to control the mind, then we have to look at our desire. Mm-hmm. Now if you think you can fight desire, you have to consider some things. That Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 verse 40 says that kama or desire has already captured our mind and our senses and also our intelligence. So where do we go? I want to control my mind. Your mind's already controlled by kama, by material desire. So you may think, all right, but I can still control the mind from the standpoint of the senses. This is as per Hatha Yoga. Sit down, in an asana, and breathe in a regulated way, this, that. They're trying from the senses to gain control over the mind. But Krishna says, sorry, those senses are already under the control of kama also. All right, then I'll go above the mind to the buddhi. And thereby higher intellect. I'll control both mind and senses. But when you open the door to your buddhi office, you will find that kama, Mr. Lust, is already there at the control panel. He's already sitting at the computer. So this is the situation of the conditioned soul. And therefore, you see, it's ironic. People get themselves into so much trouble, being dragged along by their mind, senses, and even their misdirected intelligence. And at the end they say, I never wanted this. But that was your desire.
No, ale to byla vaše touha.
And the fact that you didn't want this shows that your desire is not in your real self-interest.
A to, že jste to nechtěl, dokazuje, že vlastně ta touha není vaším skutečným zájmem.
Now, at the time the desire was coming out, you definitely did want it. You were thinking, "Yeah, this is what I want."
V době, kdy se ta touha objevila, tak to jste chtěli, protože tohle to je, co já chci, to jste si mysleli, že bude dobré.
What you didn't want was to go to hell at the end.
Co jste nechtěli, bylo jít nakonec do pekla.
But that's where the desire takes us every time,
Že tam nás ta touha nakonec vždycky dovede.
into some hellish result.
K nějakému pekelnému výsledku.
And then we say, "I didn't want this."
Takže tohle to jsem nechtěla.
We don't understand that that's where material desire always takes us.
Nechápeme, že tam to je, kam nás vodná touha vždycky dovede.
And it's just that we're so foolish and unfortunate that we follow the desire in the beginning. We think, "Oh yeah, this is nice. This is a good idea. Let me go. Let me go." Or actually, false ego, we think, "This is my idea. This is what I want."
Že jsme tak hloupí a pošetilí, že se vždycky necháme nalákat. No tohle to je přesně tohle, to já chci skrze falešné ego, to vidíme, tohle to je můj zájem.
So now we come to, I was telling you about this very interesting understanding of the subconscious.
No a teďka přejdeme k něčemu zajímavému o podvědomí.
Which I am not able, in this introductory lecture to go into in depth. But here's an interesting tidbit. Tidbit means like, if I have a big globjamun or something, and I break off a little piece and put it in your mouth. That little piece is called a tidbit. I'm not giving you the whole thing, just a little bit. And okay, so this is that desire is more subtle than the mind. Because desire is coming out of a root mental state. The root of the mind, the subconscious. Now, hopefully, as I say, in days to come, we'll bring out the explanation of this from the process of creation presented in the Bhagavatam. But today I just give you an example that Prabhupada gave. And this example is of a pond. Small lake. Yes. And what is the word for small lake in Czech? Oh. Okay. So there's the surface of the pond that you see. And this is like our surface mental awareness. The thoughts that we, so to speak, see. You see? But then there's underneath the pond, down in the water, that we don't see. So from time to time, a bubble is released from deep at the bottom of the pond. And it rises up to the surface. And there it goes, plop, and makes waves. You see, so the mind before was very peaceful. And we were thinking, yes, now I have gained control of our mind. But suddenly, bloop, the mind is disturbed, and we're wondering how that happened. Yes. So you see, this is the origin of desire. It comes from a deeper level, which is more subtle than our surface mind.
pochází z hlubší úrovně, která je subtilnější než ta hladina povrch naší mysli.
That deeper level is, we can say, a more, you can even say a more primitive condition of the mind.
A ta hlubší úroveň můžeme říct, že je takovým primitivnějším stavem mysli.
It's an earlier phase of the creative manifestation.
Ranější fáze projevu stvoření.
So now you're very interested to know more about these things. So that means you'll have to come to later seminars. Because that's all I'm going to say about this now. So, then when these seeds of desire pop up from the subconscious into the conscious mind, they bring with them a whole palette, a whole palette of subtle experience. Now this is bringing us to another very important thing that we have to know about this mind. That everything that we have ever experienced through our senses in any body that we've ever had is recorded by the mind and is filed down in the subconscious. And then those same experiences come up later as new desires or recycled desires. So when they pop into the mind, you see, then the mind is capable, even without help of the senses, the mind is capable of bringing forth sounds and smells and tastes and, touch feelings. You see, all of this is replayed in the mind. This is what happens when you dream at night. Giving you another tidbit. What is dream? Dream is, instead of the mind being engaged with the experiences coming in from the senses, the mind is engaged with the experiences of the memory. And memory means it's going down deep into the subconscious and finally down to whom? Where does memory ultimately come from? Who knows? Paramatma. This is what Krishna says. 15th chapter of Gita. Yes. So, as these seeds burst into our surface consciousness, then by the power of the mind we may see things, hear things, feel things, taste things, smell things. That are not present before our senses. And what's even worse, you see, because we're talking about something that is manifest within the mind to begin with. That's one already level of agitation. But then the mind becomes aware of its own agitation. You see, the mind starts to focus in on these sights and smells created by the mind.
Že se mysl začne zaměřovat na tyhle pohledy a chutě a vněmy, které sama vytvořila.
The mind becomes more agitated.
Ještě více rozruší.
So the mind can just agitate itself.
Takhle mysl může rozrušovat sama sebe.
This is extremely important for devotees to understand,
To je velice důležité, aby oddaní chápali.
because you're on the spiritual path.
Že jste na duchovní cestě.
And of course, spiritual life means to control the senses.
Duchovní život znamená ovládat smysly.
For spiritual practice, we do not bring our senses into contact with anything that will agitate the mind.
Takže v rámci duchovní praxe nepřivádíme smysly do styku s čímkoliv, co by rozrušovalo mysl.
This is what our regulated life is all about.
Potom je celý náš regulovaný život.
To keep the mind engaged in pure objects.
Aby mysl se zaměřovala jenom na čisté objekty.
To see the deity,
Dívat se na božstva,
to hear the kirtan in the class,
poslouchat kirtanu přednášku,
to smell the incense offered to the deity,
číchat ke větované voně,
to taste Krishna prasadam.
ochutnávat Krishna prasádu.
Like this. But even that is going on.
Ale když tohle se děje,
You need to know that the mind, in combination with this subconsciousness, is perfectly capable of becoming totally agitated just by itself.
tak musíte vědět, že mysl ve spolupráci s tím podvědomím je dokonale schopná se rozrušit sama.
And flooding your consciousness with all kinds of things that you don't want to see or remember. But there they are.
A zaplavit vaše vědomí spoustou všelijakých věcí, které už nechcete vidět a vzpomínat na ně, ale najednou tu jsou.
And again, this is coming back to desire.
To zase pochází od touhy.
So this is why. See, the logic of everything I'm saying is that control of the mind really means control of desire.
Takže logika toho všeho, co říkám, je, že ovládat mysl ve skutečnosti znamená ovládat touhy.
But how are you going to control desire?
A jak chcete ovládat touhy?
We are under the control of desire.
Teď jsme sami pod vládou touhy.
And this mind of ours, by this process I just described, produces unlimited desires.
Naše mysl právě tím procesem, který jsem tady popsal, vytváří nekonečně mnoho tužeb.
So, therefore, in one verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9,
V jednom verši Srimad Bhagavatamu 7. zpěv 9. kapitola,
text 21,
sloka 21.
The word manaha appears in the Sanskrit.
Se objevuje v sanskritu slovo manaha,
That of course means mind.
což znamená mysl.
And Prabhupada, in his word for word, he has marked manaha with an asterisk,
A Prabhupada tam v těch synonymech udělal hvězdičku ke slovu manaha.
which leads to a footnote at the bottom of the page.
Potom na spodku té stránky je poznámka pod čarou.
And there Prabhupada writes, the mind is always planning how to remain in the material world.
A Prabhupada tam píše, mysl pořád plánuje, jak zůstat v hmotném světě.
And struggle for existence.
A zápasí to existenci.
It is the chief part of the subtle body,
Je to hlavní část přítomného těla,
which consists of mind, intelligence, and false ego.
který se stává z myslí, inteligence, falešného ega.
Now, why is the mind the chief part of the subtle body?
Tak proč je mysl hlavní částí subtilního těla?
This is interesting.
To je zajímavé.
We might think that, well, wouldn't the intelligence be the chief part?
Proč to je inteligence?
Because the intelligence is supposed to direct the mind.
Inteligence má řídit mysl.
Or we might think, well, isn't the false ego the chief part of the subtle body?
To si můžeme říkat, není to falešné ego, to hlavní část.
Because it's the final, skin around our material identity.
To je jako nejvnější obal naší hmotné totožnosti.
It's the principle that keeps our consciousness bound to matter.
To je princip, který udržuje naše vědomí připoutané k hmotě.
Why is the mind the chief part of the subtle body?